Congressman Jayapal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're chair of the Progressive Caucus.
Yeah.
As you look at a potential Harris presidency, what do you see as the progressive agenda there?
Well, I think the most important thing is it needs to be a working class economic agenda that is going to lift people up, poor and working people of every race, every place across the country. You know, raising taxes on corporations, which she just announced 28% tax rate for corporations. She has been talking about investing hugely in housing. That's another one of our top priorities. Universal child care is another one of our priorities. And so I think that much of what we have negotiated with her in leadership in the Biden-Harris administration is still part of the agenda, along with codifying our basic freedoms, the freedom to vote, the freedom to make choices about our own bodies, and then, of course, getting money out of politics, which continues to be a top priority for all of us.
She spoke about Medicare for all in the 2020 campaign. She hasn't brought it up in the same way since she became the party's nominee.
Yeah.
Does that concern you that it's not part of the agenda?
No. I mean, I was the co-chair of the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force on Healthcare in 2020. And it was very clear then that we were not going to get Medicare for all because Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren both were not our candidate. Given that President Biden's legacy was the Affordable Care Act, I think Kamala Harris has been a part of that sort of viewpoint in her vice presidency. So it's difficult for her to make that switch quickly. But I hope that we have the opportunity to really talk about how we need to do some dramatic things with healthcare and rein in these private insurance companies that are just profiting off of people's illness. And we need to stop the privatization of Medicare, which we've already been working on with the Biden-Harris administration.
Joe Biden wasn't necessarily seen as a progressive when he came into the presidency. Do you see Kamala Harris as a progressive or more progressive? And how do you anticipate working within the push and pull of Democratic politics?
Well, look, I do see her as a progressive, but I also think that people get wrong the meaning of progressive. Policies that are progressive are policies that are popular with working people across the country. And you look at minimum wage as an example. This is raising the federal minimum wage is incredibly popular. States that elected Donald Trump raised the minimum wage. And when it becomes part of the mainstream, then people don't call it progressive anymore. Do I need to call it progressive to claim credit? No, I'm happy to have it done. And just like Build Back Better, I always called the president's agenda because it was more important to me that it was seen as the president's agenda than it was seen as a progressive agenda. But it's very progressive.
Republicans will put other titles on some of the plans that progressives want. They'll use the word socialist. Do you worry that by calling these ideas progressive, that you're pulling voters away from Harris in certain states that she'll need to win in order to become president?
Well, that's why I always talk about them as popular and populist, because I do think they try to weaponize that word. You know, I saw Tim Walz do this when he was being accused of all these radical liberal policies like school lunches for everybody. And he said, oh, what a monster, making sure kids' bellies are full when they're learning. I mean, I think we also have to mock back. I saw Donald Trump saying, oh, she wants to give everyone health care. And I said, oh, horrors, everyone would have health care. I mean, I just think that these are things we should point out how ridiculous it is that they are pushing back against cutting child poverty, against making sure women have the right to choose, against kids being fed, against, people having health care. These are things that are important to the American people.
When you've worked with Harris, can you describe what she's like to work with? What is she like in a room?
I've had a great experience. You know, she and I were elected on the same night in 2016. It was actually the same night that Donald Trump got elected. He instituted the Muslim ban. And I was at the airports trying to make sure people weren't getting deported. And I realized we really needed an access to counsel bill that provided people in those situations with access to counsel, legal counsel. And so I called her up and said, hey, would you do this bill with me? She was a brand new senator and she had worked on immigration. She knows this issue really well. And so she immediately said, yes, let's get our teams working on the language. And so we crafted that bill together. We introduced it together. Later, I worked on the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights with her. She was my lead sponsor in the Senate because she knows how important the care economy is. She's feisty. She's a prosecutor. She's going to be tough. We watched her in the Senate questioning people in the Trump administration. She is very well prepared. She's extremely qualified. She is a coalition builder, and I think she cares a lot about standing up for people who are most vulnerable.
And in terms of representation, what would it mean to you to have an Indian American woman elected as president?
It's a beautiful thing. I have to say, I get a little teary every time I think about it. She and I were the first Indian American women elected into each of our bodies on the same night. Obviously, Indian American people across this country are feeling so proud of her. But the thing about Kamala Harris is that in addition to being incredibly qualified in all the ways she is, she allows people to see themselves in her. It opens up possibilities for many girls and boys, people across this country, to see a different pathway for themselves because this middle-class woman who was the daughter of immigrants, who is Indian American, who is Black, who is a woman, is able to make it to the highest office of the land.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Glad you could stop by.
Yeah, absolutely.